Welcome to the Sorenson Unity Center. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm the director here, and I'm excited about this. Is the second in a new series of monthly conversations we're hosting. Last month we started it off talking about air quality, and tonight we're talking about, as you all know, the issue of education, which is a big one on the minds of community members. So we'll get right into a pretty interesting evening here shortly. Tonight I just wanted to quickly introduce, as part of our panel, we have Mayor Ralph Becker here. We also have Heather Bennett from the Salt Lake City School District. She's a board member. And Dr. Rosemary Hunter is going to be facilitating the conversation this evening. She is the director of University Neighborhood Partners just down the street. One quick little thing, and then I'll hand it off to Rosie. The next community conversations with the mayor is on April 14th, and the issue we are talking about is going to be transportation, which is definitely one on the minds of residents, as there's plans for the construction on the 1300 South viaduct just down the street here. While we're talking about transportation, a quick plug for the new Hive Pass going on sale tomorrow, ridewithhive.com. We're going to be selling those passes here on Monday. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rosie.
Thank you. And I'm wired, so I don't need that. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's time out of everybody's schedule. I recognize a lot of faces, and all of you spent today already working, and a lot of you having to do a lot of things tonight, or maybe already in school, and then coming here tonight. So I greatly appreciate it, because I think that the conversation that we have and we begin is a conversation that we want to continue to have long term, and many of you are already engaged in this work and do it full time. And so thank you for your time tonight. I want to give you just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do tonight and what some of our goals are and why we're here. And then I'd like to take some time to introduce some guests we have, and then we'll be turning it over to the mayor to talk to us about some of his priorities. But the reason that we're here tonight and some of what we hope to accomplish is that under Mayor Becker's administration, there's been an initiative that we've been calling a Capital City Education. And we've been fortunate to get technical assistance and a lot of support and mentoring, not only from the mayor's office and his education coordinator, Joanne Milner, but also from the National League of Cities, who is visiting with us tonight. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, and you'll actually hear from our guests tonight. But the real conversation that we're trying to get going is to really think about how do we pool our efforts in terms of the way we set goals and the way we use our resources and the way people are working to really get many different sectors of the community and many different people working towards supporting education for children everywhere from early childhood education to a career. And we don't want to just talk to teachers, but we do want to talk to teachers, right? But we don't only want to talk to teachers. We don't only want to talk to people who are making policy decisions about education. We don't only want to talk to mayors. We don't only want to talk to people at the university, like myself. But we want to talk to all those people, and more importantly, we want to get those people talking to each other. And that's what tonight is really about. It's to create a space, and we hope to create many of these spaces in the community as we go forward. Inside schools, inside the Sorenson Unity Center, inside multi-purpose center, inside many of our community locations, so that parents have direct access to the mayor, so that university professors like myself or people working in community programs are hearing directly from teachers who are working in schools or from policymakers who do this work. And so tonight is really about an opportunity to get people who sometimes don't get to talk to each other in the same room and have an opportunity to talk together. So we're going to hear a little bit from some of our guests so that you can hear some of the things that they've been working on. And then we're going to break out into groups, and we have breakout rooms available where we're going to focus on early childhood education, and we're also going to focus on sort of out of school time. What happens when youth aren't in school? What kinds of programs are out there to support them? And then we're going to also talk about What about post-secondary? So when you get done with high school, what's out there for everybody? Everything from a community-based course, a certificate program, applied technology, to a college education. So we're going to break up into those groups. You'll get to select which one you're interested in talking about, which one relates to you the most, and be able to get some information that we bring back to the mayor about what we heard in those focus groups, about what's our next steps of how we continue to have these conversations. Because I hope this is just the first of very many. And I hope that by working with all of you, you'll introduce us to those other spaces and the other people that we need to be talking to who aren't here tonight. Because not everybody will be here. They'll be in different locations, and we need to figure out how to get there. So I thank you for that. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction of the individual and the guests that we have visiting tonight, and then turn it over to the mayor. But I'd like to recognize Audrey Hutchinson. And Audrey, if you'll stand up. Audrey is visiting us from the National League of Cities, and she is with the Institute for Youth Education and Families. The National League of Cities, I like to say, sort of adopted us, but they're providing us with a lot of support, and the way in which they do that is not only with these visits, but with inviting us to go and see what other communities are doing and get those conversations going across the country in cities about what are other cities learning about how to do this work, and how can we learn from them, and how can we share what we're learning with them. And that opportunity has come through the National League of Cities and their support. So thank you very much. And of course, one of the roles of the National League of Cities is to open doors. And one of the doors that they've opened for us is to have some direct relationships and connections with the United States Department of Education. So I next would like to introduce Reverend Brenda Gittrin Mitchell. And if you'll please stand up, Brenda. And she is with the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. And so we're very fortunate to have her and her colleague, Ken Bedell. And Ken, if you'll stand off, is also a senior advisor with the same Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. And then also visiting us today is Robert Gomez. And Robert, if you'll stand up. Robert is just in a new position, director, please tell me. Higher Education and Outreach. And he's working particularly with Latino initiatives. Yes. And so we're going to be able to get hopefully the first of many conversations going between all of us. So thank you all for being here. And throughout the night, you'll have an opportunity to interact with them. But I'd like to next introduce Mayor Ralph Becker and really turn some time over to him to be able to talk about some of his priorities tonight.
Rosie, thank you. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I've got some long prepared remarks, but I'm not going to give them because really our primary purpose tonight is to take advantage of you coming out in your evening and listening to you about the areas that we're focusing some attention on. Both get your feedback, get your ideas, and let us benefit from your participation. Is Kyle still here? Yes,
we have two council.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to note that I'm here, of course, but Kyle Amafa, who's on the Salt Lake City Council representing this area and has shown a particular commitment and interest in our education initiatives and is spending a lot of time in the schools. So Kyle, thank you. And Lisa Adams, who's also on the City Council, is with us. Let me give you just a little background of why I've gotten involved as mayor in education. As many of you know, and I should also note, I am particularly glad that we have students with us tonight, because what we're doing is intended to be helpful to you. But your input will shape for us how we can be most helpful. So thanks, and I'm looking forward to having you really actively involved as we go forward. I served in the state legislature for 11 years. And over that time, the biggest part of the state's budget deals with education, public education. And so it's inevitably a focus in many respects for every state legislator. It's really a big part of our job is how do we best use state resources. The state has some real challenges. Of the 51 states, we include the District of Columbia, even though they're not a state, the last colony in the United States. The district, including the District of Columbia, of the 51 states, we are 51st in per pupil spending. And we are 51st by more than $1,000 per student. That has not changed. And what that means is that when it comes to resources available in public education coming out of the state, which is the largest funding source, our teachers, our administrators, and our Salt Lake City School Board and our school boards have to figure out how to do more with less. We are, I think, incredibly fortunate to have such dedicated teachers and administrators in our system that enable us not to be at the bottom in terms of performance. But what struck me more and more over time in the legislature was not only is our funding way below where it should be, but that our state at the legislative level does not recognize well what our demographics are, what the changes are in our community, and to develop a consistent effort and vision and direction for how we best provide education opportunities in our community and in our communities across the state. And it is particularly a challenge in our more urban areas and most urban area like Salt Lake City, where our demographics mean that we have the majority of our students who are minorities. We have over 100 languages spoken in our public schools. And yet those unique needs and conditions aren't reflected in the way the state funds public education. So when I was running for office, having that background, I decided that I wanted to try to do my part and do our part as a city in providing help in improving our educational system and, more importantly, providing greater opportunities for an effective and excellent education in Salt Lake City. And that means that we need, as a city government, to provide support for the separately elected school board and separate administration in the schools and figure out collectively as a community how we wrap around the work that's done in our schools to provide greater support and give greater opportunity for success for every child in our community. And that's what the promise of education is. It really is it's the great equalizer in our society where every person and certainly every student and every child should have an equal chance to succeed. We have a long ways to go. What's been happening in this administration and with the Department of Education has been of enormous value and benefit to us at the local level. The work that's done through the National League of Cities, through the Youth Education and Families Institute, where they come into communities like Salt Lake and provide a lot of expertise and a lot of assistance and mentoring to help us shape for our community what we think is going to work best. And we've had a lot of outgrowths of that effort now over 6 years. But as Joanne Milner does a great job for us in the mayor's office, and is really the first education coordinator we've had in the city, the first full-time employee working on education and city government side, probably gets tired of hearing me harp on is we need to do more and we need to do it more quickly. But a big part of that means that we as a city and as a city government need to understand as well as we can what our current conditions are for schooling and for students, what our opportunities are to make the biggest difference, and then to be able to understand what those differences are over time. And so we've had an incredible group with Rosie and others in the school district, the university, and they call themselves, and I like to call them the data divas, who really have been able to help us know to the student and classroom level where we are today and where we can see progress. And that becomes important, not just for us and for each student, hopefully, to know what we can do to make improvements, but also as we get others in the community involved, whether that's the business community and their Prosperity 2020 program through the Chamber, whether that's the university that is providing increasing resources to us to be helpful in Salt Lake City, and other institutions of higher education, or whether it's the other nonprofits who are all working in various ways to provide support. We're really able now, I think, through the work that's been laid, to identify critical places of where we can make a difference, and then to be able to really know over time for each student and for each classroom and for each school how we are making progress, or if we're not, what we need to do, hopefully, to make the changes to make progress. And so all of this is a very collective effort. And I think we've been fortunate to have a lot of dedicated folks and a tremendous amount of expertise that's helping us along the way. But in many respects, we're at the starting point, because providing that kind of foundation of information, understanding how each of us can be successful in our areas where we can do the most, is in some ways where we are now. And hopefully you and others will help us now shape the specific things that we do that are going to make the biggest difference. We think we have ideas, and we've gotten a lot of help in developing those ideas, and we have the information base now. But we're really looking to focus, as was mentioned, in 3 areas. One is in preschool. If a child does not learn how to read, we know by 3rd grade, and be literate early on, each child's chances diminish enormously. So what are the things that we can do preschool? What are the things we can do at the kindergarten level in those first few grades where teachers have kids coming in that already have had whatever background and experience they've had? What can we do to improve that child's chances before they ever even start school? What can we do to provide outside of the school day in after-school programs and in summer programs and weekend-type programs, efforts that engage our kids, both so they aren't as likely to get into trouble, but also so that their learning experience is amplified and they have a good time. And then finally, what we want, obviously, is for everyone who comes through our school system to be successful. And that, in this era, means doesn't usually stop at high school. It usually means some training, some education post-high school, post-secondary. And that can be at a university. That can be through special training in an area that's of interest and works well for any individual student. So we think we have now kind of those parameters, those factors sort of well established for ourselves. And now we're going to take some things that we've been working on and doing and try to lift it to a much higher level of engagement from us and from the community. Because our entire model is called the cultivation model. And in the center of that model and of those petals is family. And so we know that if we can wrap our services, include families from very early on, engage kids in ways that give each of them an opportunity, we're going to be successful. And my goal is not only with our changing demographics, but with this increasing influx of people moving back into the city, that we provide the standard in this state for what education can be and should be, that we draw on the strengths of this incredible diversity that we have, that we draw on what I know are the commitments in families, and I know are the commitments among educators, and get our community sufficiently engaged and supportive and involved that we change the dynamic of what public education is in Utah, starting here in Salt Lake City. And I think ambitious goals are what we need. And in this area, there's probably nothing that is more important for our future, whether it's our prosperity or the quality of life we have in our community, or in the success overall in our society, than the educational experience that we are able to give our kids as they get into and move through the education system. So, Chris, I really appreciate you hosting this, as you have for air quality a month ago, and I know we will in other areas. But I hope you'll engage in these small sessions and then bring back to us the ideas that will allow us, whether it's city government, whether it's in the school board and administrators and teachers, or whether it's ideas of where we should be going looking towards the private sector, private and nonprofit portions of the private sector, to be able to achieve that elevated effort that it's going to take for us to be successful. And we're even going to go to the state. I don't hold out any great hopes that we're going to see dramatic changes at the state immediately. But I do think we need to let them know both what we're doing and to try to get their support, both financially and otherwise, for what we're doing. And we'll be working on that as well. So with that, I'm going to stop. And Rosie, I guess I'll turn it back to you. And look forward to both the work tonight, the ideas that come forward, and everything we're able to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Becker. One thing I want to just highlight every time I hear you talk about this and others, a lot of people make note of the fact that we're a very multilingual, which also means a very multicultural community with over 100 languages. And I just think about the strength of that. I think about how you could travel all over the world and maybe not come across over 100 languages co-located together in a community. And that brings certainly challenges, but oh my gosh, like the tremendous amount of strength and asset that those language abilities and those cultures and those stories and that knowledge brings is really important to the work that we have to do ahead of us. So I thank you for highlighting that. I'd like to take an opportunity now to invite Audrey Hutchinson to come and speak and just share a little bit about what's going on with National League of Cities and why they're here tonight.
I promise you I'm not going to read the speech. It's my security blanket. First of all, I'm really, really delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We've spent the last 24 hours with many leaders in your community, and I must say it has been an eye-opener. The mayor mentioned that this city is at the beginning stages, but boy, you guys are doing some phenomenal things, and I get to see this. I'm on a plane once a week flying across the country, so I get to see a lot. So I just want to commend all of you, each of you, and I'm privileged to be able to be in a room with parents and students as well, because at the end of the day, it's about community building, it's about family success, and it's about student success. So having said all that, I just want to give you a little backdrop about why we're doing this, and thanks to my partners from the U.S. Department of Education, whom I'm having the privilege of working with. So I work for the National League of Cities, as you've heard, and for those of you who don't know who we are the oldest and largest national organization representing mayors, council members, and I'm delighted that 2 council members are in the audience. We have 49 different municipal leagues, so each state has its own organization that is working with elected leaders. And we advocate for cities and towns to strengthen leadership skills, to provide networking opportunities for city leaders, and to share best practices. And I am very fortunate to work in a very special entity within the National League of Cities, which was formed, well, the National League of Cities has been around since 1924. The entity that I work for, the special entity, I should say, that I work for is our Institute for Youth, Education and Family, which was founded in 2000 by the mayor of Boston, former mayor, I should say, he just retired, Mayor Menino, who felt that leaders like your leader and others across the country should have a go-to place to receive practical advice, best practices, tools, and resources if they want to focus their attention on issues affecting children, youth, and families. I am very passionate about education after school, so I lead that effort in my organization. But other buckets of work we focus on family economic success, violent prevention, issues affecting men of color, disconnected youth, childhood obesity, and the list goes on and on. But I wanted to give you a taste about the breadth of work that we do. And I just want to give you just 1 second about the context within which we do the education work. And we feel very strongly that even though education is not the responsibility of many cities, of municipalities do not control education in the majority of cities across the country. We believe that there are opportunities for partnership, which is what we're seeing playing out here. And we also believe that mayors can help to be conveners and to use their bully pulpit, as we're seeing here in Salt Lake, to sort of bring different partners together, as I have observed here, including parents. I believe that parents is a very, very critical component. And as I was discussing with some of my colleagues today, we need to make sure that the voices of young people are integrated in that, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you end up graduating from high school, graduating from college, and then have a good job so that you can help to contribute to the tax base here in Salt Lake City. So, which was my first point about why it's important for mayors to get involved, the whole economic development and workforce piece. I know you all care about public safety and crime prevention in your city. I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with that. Successful education outcomes definitely impact that, quality of life, and of course, city leaders sharing the outcomes with all of you partners here. And what Mayor Becker didn't tell you is that, and I can say it, is that he's the National League of Cities' first vice president and will be our president next year, and we're delighted because as a result of his leadership and the leadership of Mayor Coleman, who is the mayor of St. Paul, they have created a mayor's education reform task force, where they have engaged many mayors from across the country to try to help cities figure out how they can work in partnership with all of the different stakeholders in their community. And we're pleased that Salt Lake is part of this national movement. I don't need to tell you about what you're doing here because the mayor has alluded to it and others have. But what I want to leave with you here is that although the National League of Cities has had a very strong and solid partnership with the Department of Education since 2000, over the last year, it has become even stronger as a result of the leadership of the Mayor's Education Task Force. We have taken the task force has taken the opportunity to bring this to the attention of Secretary Duncan, which has led to this partnership. And our goal is to really continue to focus on the 3 areas that you will be discussing today: early childhood, post-secondary, and after school. And a few more words about why we do early childhood. We believe that kids, when they're ready to before they get into school, they have to be ready to learn. And that's why that's a key component. We feel strongly that after school is critical because, one, we know that working families need a safe place for their kids. We know that it supports academic achievement. And we know that safety is a big issue, as I mentioned before. And finally, we're focusing on the post-secondary agenda because we know that our society is becoming increasingly global, and there's the issue of competitiveness. And if young people, and even adults for that matter, are not getting credentials that will enable them to succeed in the marketplace, your tax base is going to suffer, Mr. Mayor, and the quality of life in your community isn't going to be as good. So that's why I do this work nationally, and I'm fired up having had this visit, and I look forward to the continued involvement and engagement with all of you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
As we get ready to break into our groups, I want to just take a couple of minutes to have Kim Schmidt come up and talk a little bit about a project that was done here in the West Side, so that it helps sort of begin to frame the conversations as we begin to break out.
Hi. How's everyone doing? Good? You guys ready to start talking? Yeah. This has been fantastic. I think what we're hearing tonight from the people who have spoken and framed the evening tonight is very exciting because it leads directly to a project that many of you have been involved in on the ground in the neighborhoods over the last few months. As you know, we're getting a new library, right? We have the new Heartland Center. We have the new Community Learning Center where the early childhood component is at. We have wonderful movement happening here in the Unity Center in terms of thinking about its next steps. And there is a movement of leaders in the neighborhood that are organizing and getting their voices out there and are present here tonight, who have very interesting ideas that we need to learn about in order to move our ideas forward. Basically, we're taking a movement away from the old idea of looking at a community in terms of what it needs and starting to look at what the strengths are in the neighborhood. I've been on all these meetings. I've been in the neighborhood only 10 years, but I'm able to be in a lot of different spaces through my role at University Neighborhood Partners. And I'm hearing about all the enthusiasm and the organizing that's going on in the neighborhood. And I start hear people talking about, well, I need to talk to so-and-so, and I need to talk to Vicky, and what's Hoel doing at the Rose Park Center, and what about Audrey? We need to all start communicating. So we said, okay, let's see if we did an asset map. What if we mapped the strengths in the neighborhood as a way to help us connect to one another to build off of what's already going on in the neighborhood? So I teach a course at the university. Do I have a student here? There's one of my students, 25, and they were game to try to do this with local leaders in the neighborhood. In the end, the first phase of this project is we mapped over 66 organizations in the neighborhood. The main focus were organizations like the Westview. Our local newspaper is Eileen's dance troupe, which is a local Polynesian dance troupe, as well as small businesses, schools, after-school programming, early childhood, all the way to post-secondary options. And we mapped 66 organizations and 373 programs. And last week, we brought a lot of these people back together to look at the data that they collected, this map that we made of the strengths that are already in the neighborhood. And now people are beginning to work together in smaller groups in their area to figure out how they could maybe maximize their resources. Who aren't they reaching? Why aren't they reaching those people? Who are the leaders they're working with? Are they working with leaders, or are they just making decisions on their own? And so we're excited to move that forward. And then the second piece of that is we worked very closely with 7 local leaders in the neighborhood. And those leaders brought our students into different pockets in the neighborhood to ask community residents about their views, about their goals for their own neighborhood, and how they'd like to organize and what they'd like to organize around. And I have a 20-page document that I'm working on of recommendations. And tonight is actually the fruition of one of those recommendations. And that was more resident-to-city contact. And tonight, it's a fun to see this actually happening and to see the community coming together around it. You're going to be able to learn more about this, and what happens tonight will contribute to this community development effort, but I just wanted to give you a teaser of what's been going on. Okay?
Okay, enough talking. Now it's time for you all to get together and start talking. We have 3 rooms set up. Thanks to Chris, who has set up the Sorenson Center and given us all this space. The first room is early childhood education. So for those of you who want to talk about preschool, early childhood, beginning from birth. The middle one is about after school, what happens when you're out of school, after school time, or out of school programs. That may be located in churches. That may be located in after school programs. That might be located in the Sorenson Unity Center, right? And then the other one is about post-secondary education. So what happens after high school, and how do we think about how we prepare people? We have 3 facilitators, or maybe even 6. Can my facilitators identify themselves? Who's our early childhood facilitators? Let's start with them. If you will, or if you're interested in early childhood, you're going to follow these ladies into the first room. They have a set of sort of questions that they'll begin to get the focus group started. And one of the things I want you to remember is that you identify somebody who will come and report out to your group, and then we can engage both Heather and Mayor Becker in a conversation. Our out-of-school facilitators, if you'll raise your hands, thank you very much. Out-of-school, after-school programs, follow those two into the middle room. And then who's our post-secondary facilitators? Kim, okay. All right, and they're going to be in the third room. So if you'll go ahead and break out into your breakout groups, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion to really hear from all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for hanging in there. What we'd like to do now is just briefly hear a little bit of a report out from each group so that we can kind of hear the conversation that happened in the rooms that we weren't in. So if we'll start with early childhood, Robin?
So we talked about what are the needs. Well, we need funding for early childhood. We need to make sure people, thank you. We need funding for early childhood. We need to educate everyone in understanding what are developmentally appropriate practices. That goes with family education, community networking, awareness of the windows of opportunity that occur only between birth through 5. After 5 years old, some of those windows start to close. A lot of people don't understand that. Neighbor-to-neighbor connection and mentoring. So as one family learns this information, they share it with others. We talked about the importance of reading all across ages and the neighborhood connectivity. Barriers to all of this, lack of time in families, transportation, getting students to and from a location, especially when the session is only 3 hours. What do people do if they need care for their child the whole day? The education piece and the child care piece, how do we make a connection for those? What about children that may have some special needs? And those needs are identified very, very early, but is there access to any kind of a program for them? Finding quality providers that are consistent, and that goes back to salaries, benefits, and continued employment for people who work in the early childhood area, because the majority of those people are not contract employees and have no benefits. So they're paid hourly, and they don't have any work in the summer. So again, back of the lack of understanding of child development, so letting people know those windows of opportunity are so important, birth to 5. And then access to these programs, again, when the hours don't match a parent's working schedule or the caregiver's schedule, that's a problem. Affordability, even if tuition is low, we're not funded, so $25 a month might be too much money, even for a family, even though it seems low to others. Do we have enough space for all the children? If every early childhood student, just 4-year-olds in Salt Lake City, came to school, do we have the space for them? Well, it'd be so exciting to find out. We need to have more parent involvement coming in, like our Parents as Teachers program, where we invite parents and their families to come in and learn about child development. Again, supportive families, alternative ways, maybe if there is tuition, alternative ways to have to pay that. And then we talk about transportation being a problem again. And big one that came up, and that's why we're kind of the last ones in here, communicating about the importance of early childhood, about when these kinds of meetings are taking place, and how parents and families can have a voice and let their voice be heard.
Out of school time? Do you want to introduce yourself too, Ken?
Hi, I'm Ken Perko. I'm with the Youth City After School program, so I manage the program at the Central City Rec Center. So we had we had a nice conversation, and what was
Here,
great
I'll
was...
pretend I'm Vanna here.
You'll just have to come up and read them yourselves. No. Well, we were fortunate enough to have some kids in our group with us.
Let me hold these.
Oh boy. All right.
Yeah, again, Vanna.
And so he's left, of course. He's got cooler things to do. But he sort of pointed out that the needs were academic support, tutoring services. Also came up the idea of having some athletics, a balance of those things. Also career exploration, so an opportunity to learn about careers and sort of explore possibilities while still in school. We also talked about the need for positive youth development models for whatever type of programming is being provided. Providing a third place, this sort of came up as talking about a safe place where a kid can find a sense of belonging. The nice parallel that was brought up was, we have our workplaces where we can be someone other than we are at home, but for kids it's school or home, and they might want a third place where they can be someone else or explore other friendships or other interests. Building and establishing a sense of community was something that was definitely a need. Surveys of what kids want sort of came up at the end, but really finding out from kids what is it that's going to draw them into the program. Other resources becoming available, basic needs are met. That was something that the boy who was in the group with us sort of said, that he gets dinner through the Kids Cafe program, but meeting those needs in summer times that the school helps provide through free lunch and free breakfast programs. Summer academic support, there was a lot of talk about the sort of summer slide, so kids, the summer learning loss, and helping to stem that through not necessarily an exclusively academic programming, but something that will provide academic support over the summer. Oh boy. Let's see, other needs. Interest-specific programs, again, to sort of draw those kids in and keep them engaged. And more support for school-based clubs. So something that would help with, the barriers, as we're moving on to needs or barriers, transportation. So that would help keep kids at school and sort of, being able to do these things in that environment. Cost was, of course, a barrier. Finding programs, so again, sort of something that was echoed in the pre-K program, knowing what's available and that kid, parent, and program communication, because sometimes kids know about a program but parents don't, or parents know but the kids don't think it's going to be cool or whatever. So having a more effective communication there, and as it relates to that language and translation and making sure that we're reaching the community as possible. Yes? I'm sure they wanted to. I'm sure he did. I mean, we were sort of talking about it more from what do you want in out of school time, and he was talking about that sort of, he didn't describe it as job readiness, but I think, the opportunity to explore and think about future careers, but I'm sure summer employment is a big thing, at least the kids I work with, that's a big thing they're asking for. It's a very good point. It's definitely a need. It didn't get addressed specifically, but definitely agreed. So something moving on to what would help access out of school time programs, again related to cost, scholarships. Someone brought up the need for a new model other than a pay-to-play model. So something that sort of embraces sort of participation without paying the fee. So sort of taking it as accepted that kids get to participate rather than those who pay get to play. Also, a welcoming environment for parents. So it sort of relates to that communication, but really having a place where parents feel welcome and feel like they're going to be nurtured and maybe they would have programming that is beneficial to them as parents. And of course, local community newspapers would serve to help reach out to parents.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for your work on that. Will post-secondary?
Hi, my name's Ed Figueroa. We're going to kind of present this, both of them. Some of the things we covered was the importance of reaching out and educating the parents about the responsibilities and their role in their kids' education. They have a big part to play in it, right? The language was something else we addressed, especially in this community where we have a couple of large immigrant population, a large refugee population, a population in transition here. We're going to have that language issue that we have to address with the parents. One of the things that I stressed was that make a vocational track just as easily accessible as a higher college track, education track, for those kids that maybe don't want to go to college or not inclined to go to college or aren't going to go to college. Make that vocational track just as accessible to them, because you can support a family, contribute to the tax base if you have a skill.
Also, that education, the education information to the parents. I know we give them, pamphlets in school and we send them out, but we have to build that personal connection with these parents. So, maybe starting counseling for higher education earlier, middle school, 9th grade, finding ways to make that personal connection, to earn that trust of that parent, because they're more willing to listen to you if you create that. Also that transition between, we have that transition from high school to college, but we're also missing that transition between junior high to high school and elementary school to junior high. And that, as someone said, your freshman year in high school determines what you're going to probably do for the rest of your life. If you focus there, you'll focus for the rest of your life. So, we got to get, pretty much the transition down and, information flow down. And I think that's it.
Thank you. To all the groups. I want to be aware of our time, but just in a couple minutes, if you feel like there was questions that you didn't get answered or comments that you didn't have that you'd like to direct to Heather Bennett and or Mayor Becker, we'll take a couple opportunities to take any questions from the audience or comments that you felt weren't captured here.
Yeah, I'd like to say this is a pretty awesome forum to address some of the issues that are going on in the community, especially about education. And I want to thank you for giving us all here the opportunity to address those issues. So thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you. Others?
I just wanted to stress the importance that I think the arts and creativity have in engaging and keeping youth engaged in education. We all know that arts funding has been cut, and so what maybe we could have both of you address that. What is the city doing at a city level? What is the Salt Lake City School District doing to make sure that funding for the arts is robust?
Are you wired?
Oh, that's right, we're mic'd up.
You're wired, go for it.
Mike, do you want me to start?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. I think it's an ongoing challenge, and you're right in some ways that funding has been cut, especially for elementary programs compared to when I was in elementary school. But we've also seen a recent resurgence in interest in it, and our district has specifically been very successful, don't tell anyone else in the state, at taking advantage of the Beverly Taylor Sorenson Arts Learning Grants. We have, I think, art specialists soon we will have them in all our schools, right, Cynthia? We have them, I don't know the exact number, but in most of our elementary schools there is an artist working in the schools. Some schools, instead of choosing that program, have taken a different direction, gone a different direction, and found funding to hire full-time or nearly full-time art specialists in the schools. And that's just what you have to do. I think there are lots of models that are promising and interesting for the district to investigate, and the BTS model is this side-by-side model where the teacher and the art specialists work together to integrate curriculum. That's a great model. There are others that we also need to look at. I went to the dedication of the Beverly Taylor Sorenson Arts Education Complex at the university today, and she talked about specifically the joy that the arts bring into the lives of children. And that's something that we, in the age of accountability, we need to remember to hang on to. I think the answer, Charlotte, is you just have to take every opportunity to hang on to funds. And as parents, we have to make it a priority. Bring it to the community councils of the schools. Make it clear to everybody that you want to see arts in the schools.
So fortunately, we've got great people like Heather, and I mean, we've been fortunate in this community and in the state because of Beverly Sorenson and the kind of legacy she left for us. There's been such a focus on science, technology, and math, the STEM program, and I heard someone say it actually should be STEAM. It should be science, technology, arts, and math, because of the benefits that brings in the community. In terms of the city, certainly through our Youth City program, we've been doing some work there. We reformulated the program. It was somewhat controversial because we felt we were not reaching enough kids through the way we had it structured. So we're now working with a lot of the nonprofits. We've got some really cool groups like Bad Dog and Spy Hop and some other opportunities for kids. And I mean, I think we obviously will always rely heavily on the school district, but we're going to need some help, and certainly we got some ideas today, but I think we're going to need some help in helping us focus the resources from the city to reach out to the kids who are most in need. And that was the reason we reformulated the program. So instead of the city actually doing the work, we've tied into a lot of the nonprofits in the community that are doing work to leverage our resources further. And I think there's been some success with that, but we need to go further.
How have you gauged the success? Or have you?
So what I've heard is two ways. One of them is the number of kids served. We have exponentially increased the number of kids we're reaching out to. And we felt we were not necessarily reaching the kids who are most underserved. And so we've been able to gauge that part of it. I don't know how you measure arts necessarily in terms of whether or not it's engendering both the creativity that we want, which is pretty natural with kids, but also in terms of kids being more attuned to the value of an education. I mean, I know in my own case, I really wasn't interested in school when I was a kid, but I like sports, and I found that I really like art, of all things. I had no artistic and continue to have no artistic skills, but I liked it, and it kept me involved, and I think that's true for a lot of kids. So how we deal with the fact that that's an area that's been cut at the state level, with additional efforts at the city level and the school district level, I think that remains an open question.
There's actually plenty of research that proves that involvement in the arts is a great pathway to success in all areas. So again, you just have to always be vigilant looking for opportunities to leverage the work of nonprofits, to leverage the work of people in the school district to bring arts education to more kids. And we've got lots of great nonprofits in this whole few days that we've spent together has reminded me of how important it is to make those connections. And we can't actually do everything, and the city can't do everything. But together, we probably can do everything. working with the nonprofit groups in our city.
Yes.
This is just kind of a question. Why couldn't you get different art type people to volunteer sometimes to come in? As you were talking about art, I thought about when I was in junior high, I had an art teacher who, he took pictures of us. We got to develop our own pictures. We had other projects, but I remember that one the best. Then we learned how to tint it. I don't remember the other projects that we had, but I thought, for junior high kids and high school kids, you couldn't get some people in like that that could show them how to do different techniques for maybe just 1 or 2 classes. I was wondering if that was a possibility.
Definitely it's a possibility, and actually that is a big piece of the mosaic. There are lots of good volunteers in all of our schools that do that. I know, I've seen it in my own kids' classrooms. I've done it in my own kids' classrooms, and you have to invite parents to come in when they can to do that. Absolutely.
I see there's a question back here.
Mine's less of a question, more or less just a kind of a statement I wanted to throw out there. When you talk about art and the importance that it plays in development and education, I thought I'd mention that outdoor exposure to nature. The book Last Child in the Woods kind of talks about how many benefits there are for kids that get access to unstructured outdoor natural setting play. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there in connection with the art and creativity. That's I think also something that's an important topic.
Thank you.
I might just mention as it relates to that, a couple of weeks ago I hosted a mayor symposium with the College of Architecture and Planning called Mountain Urbanism. And there had been a lot of preliminary work done talking about our relationship to our landscape here, which we know is a fabulous feature of this, an asset really of this community. And I noted that when I go into classrooms and ask people, particularly in this part of the city, how many kids are getting out to the mountains or experiencing, it is a hand or 2 that comes up normally. And that lack of a connection is such a huge loss for the kids here, given what the assets we have, but also in general in terms of helping us as a society ongoing. I've been connecting really through the National League of Cities. I've started connecting with some national organizations that are focused on connecting kids with nature. And we are working as we speak on bringing substantial resources, and I intend to make it a big focus of mine to take advantage of how we both take advantage of these landscapes we have and the environment that we have here, which is just about unique in the country. And giving kids really the opportunity to be exposed, as you said, in an unstructured way, sometimes in a more structured way, so that becomes a part of every kid's experience who's growing up in this community. So there's going to be a lot more to come on that, but it's the seeds have been planted.
Thank you. I want to, at this time, ask Cynthia Tabbitt-Holtz to come up and just do a closing and a wrap-up for us of sort of what's next steps, because this is just a beginning conversation, but I also want you to know what we're going to be doing with some of this input. So if you'll just sort of give us a closing and talk about next steps.
Thank you first for all of your work tonight, and don't be surprised if we're not in touch in the near future for some more input. We have just been informed that as part of our work with the National League of Cities, we will be preparing a master plan that we have to have completed by April for the Lumina Foundation around capital city education. We've been invited as a metro city to apply and this is by invitation only. Thank you. Because we are on a very short timeline, I'm not kidding, we will be calling you. We have started the plan. We've spent 2 years getting incredible technical assistance, and this plan, we hope, will be an organic plan that will continue to evolve and change as our community continues to evolve and change, and a capital city education will truly start to create in Salt Lake City a culture around cultivating education, college, and civic readiness. So, thank you.
One more time, thank you, Mayor Becker, for being willing to create this space, and Heather for being here tonight. And also, I'd like to say thank you to Chris Peterson, our host for the evening, who really did a lot of work, not only to have this space, but to be able to get the word out to the community. So thank you all. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you all for taking your evening. Appreciate it.